The 20th of July, 2019. St Clair Avenue, Western Sydney. 11:43 p.m. A 000 call was made.
Lady, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Your name's Jessica?
My fingers are broken.
Okay.
Mum has had enough of me because I admit I've been a challenge, and this ongoing thing's been going for months. Anyway, she had enough of me. She grabbed me by the hair and dragged me from my room all the way to the kitchen, and she got a knife and she tried to stab me with it, and I grabbed the knife off her because I thought she was going to stab me, so I stabbed her back. And I was so heated up with anger, I just kept stabbing her, and I took off her head. Her head is, I ran to my neighbour, not this neighbour, my other neighbour before this one, who's on the other side. He was at work. I told him to call the ambulance and the police immediately. He's going to do so, but no one's at home because everyone in the family is at work now. Okay. So he wasn't much help. He said, all I can do is I'll call the police and the ambulance to my address, and I thought it was going to take a bit of time, so I ran to my other neighbour on the other side. Okay. And I had my mum's head in my hand. I know this sounds insane, but I was taking it for evidence to show the neighbour. In the struggle, in the frustration, I didn't know what I was doing. I cut her head off. I chopped her head off with a knife. There was all sorts of knives. There was about seven knives I was stabbing her with. A few of the knives broke. When that knife broke, I got another one and did the same.
Where's the knives now?
They're all in the kitchen. There's blood everywhere. Yes.
And you're outside the house?
Yes. The ambulance and the police have rocked up. Do you want to stay on the phone?
No, that's okay. What's your phone number, Jessica?
Look, you're better off. This is my mum's phone number, but my mum's not here anymore, okay? She's gone.
Police officers arrived at the scene, and Senior Constable Anthony D'Agostino clicked record on his body cam. Stood in the dark and lit up by the officer's flashlight was a young woman, covered in blood. "I killed my mum. My mum's head is over there," she said. "25-year-old Jessica Camilleri was the second daughter of Maltese-Australian couple Vince and Rita. From an early age, things had been difficult for Jessica and her family. Jessica had been born with additional needs and had an IQ of between 55 and 60. It took her longer to reach various developmental milestones such as walking and talking, and teachers quickly noticed these delays too. Amongst her conditions, Jessica had ADHD, bipolar disorder, and was autistic. She also had something called intermittent explosive disorder, which would manifest itself in sudden outbursts of violence and aggression. This is not just normal anger, it is a mental disorder that usually starts at the age of 6 and intensifies in adolescence and early adulthood, one expert would later say. This was often made worse by the fact she was the target of bullies in school. When she did have outbursts at school, she would attack teachers and students, normally leading to her being suspended. It was usually directed at other girls, but in one instance she bit a male student. Teachers tried to pull her off him, but she refused to release her teeth and let him go. Alongside her outbursts, Jessica also had deficits in judgment and awareness of other people's thoughts, feelings and empathy. In 2015, when Jessica was still a teenager, her parents split up. Her father was at a loss as to how to deal with her behaviour, and that his wife Rita couldn't discipline her effectively. Rita was devoted to her family, and alongside being a carer for Jessica, she also cared for her mother, and the strain of all of this continued to get worse. Jessica worked at a Kmart in Mount Druitt part-time as a cashier, and she would spend her free time watching her favourite horror films, mainly Saw and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Her social media posts documented her obsession with horror films, and they also highlighted her close relationship with her mother. One thing she would do in her pastime was she would make up phone numbers, mainly using 2, 3 and 5 as they were her favourite numbers. She would call them many times throughout the day, hoping men would answer, and when they did, she told them if they put the phone down on her, she would chop their heads off. By 2018, Jessica had begun to obsessively call a company in Victoria and became infatuated with the boss of the company, a man called Matthew. She had phoned several male members of staff telling one, "You're going to die of f***ing cancer, and if not, I will stab you until you die, motherfucker." She would threaten, "I will stab you and cut your head off with a knife." It would always end that way no matter who she was talking to, Matthew said. After the calls lasted for around 2 months, Rita also phoned them to say she was at her wit's end with her daughter's behaviour and didn't know what to do anymore. She said she was going to take away her daughter's phones in the hope that it would stop. The calls did stop, But after just 2 weeks, they started up again. She found Matthew's friends and relatives on Facebook and began harassing them, even targeting his wife and his wife's sister, saying, "I'll cut your head off with a chainsaw and flush it down the toilet." The harassing calls would be upwards of 100 times a day. Matthew contacted Rita again, telling her this is getting out of hand and something needs to happen. Rita said that after seeing his photograph, Jessica had developed a huge crush on Matthew. This wasn't the only way that her behaviour would manifest. Jessica had been banned from the doctor's surgery after she had become angry at a female patient and needed to be restrained. Her anger was also on display in shopping centres and on the street as she would become angry with the women around her. She was taken to hospital and became enraged with a female nurse. She was subsequently admitted to a psychiatric unit for 9 days to treat an episode of severe mood disorder. Jessica had been on a variety of medications, including antipsychotics, mood stabilisers and antidepressants, but they appeared to be having very little impact. As 2018 was coming to an end, Jessica was no longer on her medication and instead was using alternative natural remedies. In spite of all of these difficulties, Rita refused to give up on her daughter and would always protect her and stick up for her. People outside of the family were also aware of what was going on, and messages that Rita had sent to a friend highlighted this. They read, "The other day I had to call an ambulance because Jess had a meltdown and was getting uptight and I didn't know what to do, so I called the ambulance at 2 in the morning, and the ambulance came with the police, but they didn't take her to hospital because she hadn't done anything at that time, and she got scared and worries at the time because she did not want to go back to the mental health unit hospital again. She needs to wake up to herself because if she doesn't, the police officer who came to my house with the ambulance told me if we find ourselves back here and have to come back out to the house for this matter, this time she won't be so lucky. And I said to her to stop this and let go of this guy." This was in reference to a man that Jessica was having problems with, and it would be referred to in another message that Rita sent to the same friend. "I'm just informing you that Jess has changed her Facebook account. She is no longer on her old Facebook account because of that guy she was having problems with. I told her if I were you, I would not be mucking around with this D-head ever again. Otherwise, it is going to be her own grave she will be digging, and she is now scared and worried. Our whole family told her she is playing with fire doing this. Just let the D-head go. He is not worth it by a long shot." The same friend whom Rita had been messaging would also reach out to Jessica, telling her she needed to be careful. Jessica replied, "My mum said that. I don't know what the F you're worrying about. He's not even good looking. He is an ugly D-head. You are worrying and wasting your days and time wanting to get even with that ugly pig. And she is right, and so are you. I don't want to be locked up in some home for the rest of my days over this ugly mother effer." Jessica's very difficult behaviour continued to escalate. Her older sister Christy would later say that in a moment of desperation and feeling like all of their options were not working, in early July 2019, Rita consulted a medium who quoted nearly $5,000 to, quote, "get the demon out of Jessica." Rita paid $2,500 but never received anything for it. Also that month, a family friend aired their deep concerns to Rita about Jessica and her behaviour, saying that they believed Jessica was going to murder someone one day. Rita's response was, "Not my Jessica, she wouldn't hurt a fly." On the 19th of July, Rita took Jessica to the police station regarding the nuisance phone calls that had been going on for ages. As we've established, this is not the first contact she had had with the police. Over the previous 6 years, Jessica had been convicted of 2 counts of assault occasioning actual bodily harm and 2 counts of common assault. She did not go to prison and was instead released into the care of her mother. The 20th of July 2019. Jessica and her mother had been in a car park and a man had walked past them. Jessica then became deeply angry at her mother, convinced that Rita had humiliated her in front of him. They went to her sister's house and the tension continued to mount, and Rita was desperately trying to calm Jessica down. Jessica then asked for a doctor to come out, but once the doctor arrived, she left saying that she was in fear for her life. Jessica chased the doctor down the driveway, but the doctor was able to get into her car and drive off. At the time, Rita was looking after her 4-year-old grandson, known as Child A, and Jessica believed that her mother was paying too much attention to him instead of her. At 9:18, 9:20 and 9:21 p.m, Jessica called the fast food chain Red Rooster, trying to get more food. Rita had had enough, telling her, "I'm ringing 000 to get an ambulance here and put you back into care, back into the mental health care system." The situation just kept getting worse. Jessica followed her mother to the bedroom, where she knocked her to the ground and then dragged her to the kitchen by her hair. It was here that she would launch her attack. Jessica Camilleri had stabbed her mother more than 100 times in the kitchen, using 7 knives, several of which broke due to the sheer force. Rita survived the first 90 stab wounds. Her daughter then decapitated her and mutilated her head, with her nose, tongue and eyes being removed. Jessica also carried out what were referred to as acts of cannibalism. She then picked up her mother's head and carried it outside to show the neighbours. The police soon arrived and they were met with a scene like nothing they could have prepared for. Standing outside her house and covered in blood, Jessica said, "Mum's head is on the concrete over there. Can they sew the head back on? Can you bring someone back to life if they don't have a head? There's nothing you can do, she's a goner. Because I know doctors can do miracles. They can't re-sew her head." The police officer replied, "That's a bit of a stretch. I thought doctors can do miracle surgeries and put the head back on, no? Is anything going to happen to me? Do I get the death penalty?" "We don't do the death penalty in Australia," an officer said. "Okay, so I've got nothing to worry about," she replied. In the chaos and confusion of a scene like this, the officers needed to understand exactly what had happened. As previously mentioned, Rita had been babysitting her 4-year-old grandson. He had tried to stop Jessica from attacking her. He had attempted to hit Jessica with the lid of a toy box to get her to stop the attack against his grandmother. And when Jessica pushed him away, she lacerated his hands and head and caused a wound to his face. He was treated in hospital and then discharged to be cared for by his family. The news of this brutal murder sent shockwaves through Australia. Police Detective Superintendent Brett McFadden told reporters, "The family is distraught as to what has taken place. This is up there with one of the most significant, most horrific scenes police have had to face. There is no stepping away from the fact that this was horrific and a significant attack, and the injuries that the victim suffered were extensive. It is a very difficult, challenging, confronting investigation."
A vicious, brutal killing almost beyond imagination. Stabbed repeatedly, then beheaded.
She was her daughter's carer, protector and only friend. But at 57, Rita Camilleri was killed in the most horrifying manner imaginable. Jessica Camilleri decapitated her mother after stabbing her in the head and neck more than 100 times in their home at St Clair in Western Sydney.
Rita fought desperately for her life. She suffered 90 defensive wounds.
To cope with the horror of what they had seen that night, the officers and emergency services who had attended the call were offered counselling. As CSI officers were going over the scene and police were gathering statements, tributes to Rita began to pour in. One of her friends said, "To add to the sadness, Rita was looking after her bedridden, frail mother too. This is just horrific. She was fun, irreverent and vibrant. She loved music and was very community-minded. She connected with everyone because she was lovely." One neighbour remarked, "They always seem to have parties, all the time, just parties over there. I never heard anything like shouting or screaming. There had been some issues in the past that had made Jessica known to the cops and other groups, but it seems it has gone much further this time." At St Mary's police station, Jessica's hands were covered with evidence bags and her mother's dried blood was still on her body and clothes. She told the police, "She's had enough of me. She was at her wit's end. I want everyone to know this. I've hurt a lot of people in the past, but I have never laid a finger on my mum until tonight. I understand she has had enough of me because I'm a piece of work. My mum lost her patience. I wanted to give her a taste of her own medicine, but not to kill her. I had to keep stabbing her. I think that's what's happened, and then her head just came off. When my mum's head came off, I didn't think to put it into a bag. I had my mum's phone and my phone in my left hand. I was carrying my mum's head in my other hand. It slipped out of my hand, I couldn't pick it up. The head just remained on my neighbour's footpath. I don't know how my sister and my dad is going to be towards me after this." The officer replied and told her that they were extremely upset. The day after the killing, Jessica appeared in Parramatta Bail Court via a video link, charged with murder. She made no application for bail and told the court, "I really need medical attention. I told all the officers and told the police at the station. I cannot move my fingers properly because of the incident. I am not fit to come to jail until I get cleaned up. I could not wash myself properly in the shower to get all the blood off me because of my fingers." The magistrate ordered that she be assessed in hospital before her next appearance in front of the court. She entered a plea of not guilty to murder, arguing that her mental health conditions had seriously reduced her self-control. Her barrister said it should be changed to a charge of manslaughter. While she was in prison awaiting trial, psychiatrist Professor David Greenberg would speak to her, and he later said, after leaving school she was placed in supportive environments where she had explosive outbursts and was asked to leave. She was unable to cope in all of these environments, so she ended up on disability support pension. She won't lose control on every occasion, loses control when there's a stressor or she perceives provocation. The psychiatrist's reports also stated that she said, "I know people will think I'm sick. I thought I'll put her out of her pain. I was so agitated and frustrated because I was thinking sick thoughts." She would later tell him that she had got the idea to do it from a horror film, telling him to write that down for the judge. She told Professor Greenberg, "I wasn't thinking, I was panicky, frustrated, enraged. Mum was slapping me, she grabbed me by the hair. I grabbed my mum. I dragged her all the way to the kitchen by the hair. I saw red. Remember pulling the knife. I wanted to scare her at first. Mum got the knife off me and chucked it away. I was so agitated I lost it. I was stabbing her. I was so angry. I think I had sick thoughts. I got it off horror movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Jeepers, Creepers and Saw. I remember stabbing my mom. I wouldn't stop. Was getting her everywhere. I was getting the adrenaline going." When it came to Jessica's personality, Professor Greenberg said she presents as egocentric or self-centered, has a history of demanding attention and a problem when attention is not focused on her. She has a sense of entitlement and an unreasonable expectation of favourable treatment. When her needs are not met, she can be furious. She believes she is unique because of her disability and can be exploitative. She feels her disability makes her needs special, fails to recognise others also have feelings and needs. She is very sensitive to criticism and may react with disdain or rage. Even though she was now in custody, her behaviour continued to manifest in explosive outbursts. And before standing trial, she was involved in several incidents in prison. On September 10th, 2019, she was charged with assault after she threw a cup of tea at a fellow inmate. Roughly a month later, on the 14th of October, she was given 5 days in her cell after attacking another inmate. On the 3rd of November, she failed to obey a direction, and then in July the following year, she was charged $200 after damaging property. Another 7 days in the cell came on November 21st, 2020, after another assault. On the 30th of November 2020, the case that had captured Australia would finally go to court, and the trial of Jessica Camilleri began. It would take place at the New South Wales Supreme Court in front of Justice Helen Wilson and would last for 5 days. Jessica, who was now 27 years old, would occasionally smile at the guards in the court as she sat in the dock next to her support worker. In his opening statement, the prosecutor said that Jessica had a lengthy history of assaulting people and that Rita was overly protective and defensive over her. The court was told that Jessica had an unreasonable expectation of treatment, a history of demanding attention, poor self-esteem, but a sense of entitlement. When first questioned by the police, she had said that she had acted in self-defense, saying that her mother had threatened to take her to a psychiatric unit and attacked her. When this was told to the court, members of her family could be heard letting out what were referred to as exasperated sighs. Jessica's sister Christy testified and said that Jessica constantly demanded attention and would order her mother around. She added that Jessica would often pause and rewind her favourite sections of her favourite horror movies and would go into a frenzy if they were taken away from her. When it came to Jessica's behaviour, Rita felt she had been let down by the various support services over the years. She was exhausted by the strain of trying to care for her. The court heard that when Jessica's father had left, her behaviour had worsened as he had control over her and discipline. Rita's sister said she had spoken to her many times about her daughter's behaviour. She was blinded and couldn't see what I could see. She was a mother, and a mother's love knows no boundaries. I pray Jess will get the help she needs, so Rita can rest in peace knowing her daughter is being looked after by a system that let her down. The court also heard from Professor Greenberg, who had spoken to Jessica extensively whilst in prison. He said she prefers to talk to men because that excites her. She's not particularly interested in talking to women. If they insult her or become angry or distressed by her calls, she becomes distressed, and that kicks into her intermittent explosive disorder. He added, "There's no one disorder that describes her. I'm of the opinion that at the time of the incident, she likely had the capacity to understand the events and judge whether her actions were right or wrong. However, I'm of the opinion that based on the comorbid psychiatric diagnoses, her capacity to control herself was substantially impaired by her abnormality of mind arising from her underlying conditions." The defence called forensic psychiatrist Dr. Richard First, who said he believed that Jessica had a long-standing abnormality of the mind and that she knew what she was doing was wrong. He said that the main question was whether or not she had the capacity to control her behaviour. He said that he felt that ability was impaired. The absolute horror of what had happened that night in July was laid bare as a constable read out a statement. On the tiled floor was the body of the deceased, head decapitated, 6 knives broken and intact surrounding the deceased. To the right was a human tongue. Further to the right under the fridge was a piece of skin I believed to be a human nose. The head had numerous jagged and penetrating wounds exposing the cervical spine. Human eyeballs were on the tiles under the deceased's neck. Her body was in a prone position on the floor, feet pointing towards the oven area. The legs were straight with the soles of the feet facing upward and a clump of dark hair on the right foot. The injuries on the right hand and wrist were defensive wounds. The left arm was bent at the elbow and the left hand resting on her neck area. With all of the information now having been put forward, it was time for the jury to retire and consider their verdict. And on the 10th of December 2020, after 2 days of deliberations, that verdict came in. Jessica Camilleri was found not guilty of murder, but instead guilty of manslaughter.
Jessica Camilleri sat expressionless in the dock despite many of her family members breaking down in tears while explaining to the court what impact Rita's death has had on their lives. Her lawyers saying due to her mental disorders, she doesn't react the same emotionally as other people do.
Jessica's sister Christy would later speak outside court.
She had the support from many avenues, and unfortunately I feel that our mental health system let her down, let my mother down, let my whole family down. My mother was a beautiful person inside and out, a heart of gold, and she would have put anybody in front of her own needs. I have to live with a little boy that has to live with that trauma for the rest of his life, and she has no support from our family, so I don't really care what happens to her from this point on or when she is released. And I just hope that it is a length sentence so that way members of the community remain safe. My mother went through every avenue, doctors, psychiatrists, the mental health system itself, and nothing ever pulled through, which led us here. I can't look at her. She took our mother like she was nothing. Thank you.
The unlawful killing of Rita Camilleri on the 20th of July 2019 must be regarded as one of the most serious instances of manslaughter it is possible for any imagination to conjure. A plea of guilty or an offer to enter a plea of guilty can sometimes operate as evidence of remorse. I do not regard it as such in the present instance. Immediately after killing her mother, the offender's concern was for herself. She invented an account of having been attacked by her mother in an attempt to avoid responsibility for what she had done. When her family gave their victim impact statements to the court during the sentence proceedings, the offender seemed uninterested rather than saddened at what were, objectively, deeply moving accounts of loss and enduring grief. There is a real issue here of the offender's future dangerousness and a requirement to consider what is needed for the protection of the community. The offender told Professor Greenberg, and medical notes record, that she had assaulted a number of other people in the community. Since entering custody and despite the close supervision provided in a custodial environment, the offender has been both criminally charged and institutionally penalised for offending behaviour. Upon her eventual release from prison, the offender will not have the support and supervision of her mother, and she will not have her mother to ensure that she attends medical appointments and takes prescribed medication. She will not have a calm and safe family home to go to upon release. The possibility of a violent outburst against someone in the community looms large. The protection of the community must be a significant consideration. In light of the extreme gravity of this crime, the very great harm done, and the need to protect the community from the offender, a stern sentence is called for. Before that sentence is imposed, I wish to extend my sympathy and the sympathy of the court to the offender's sister and her family. I recognise that no sentence imposed upon the offender can make good their loss or diminish the grief they feel. Miss Camilleri, would you stand up, please? For the manslaughter of Rita Camilleri on the 20th of July 2019, the offender is sentenced to a term of imprisonment for 21 years and 7 months, commencing on the 20th of July 2019 and expiring on the 19th of February 2041. The non-parole period is one of 16 years and 2 months imprisonment, which will expire on the 19th of September 2035. My thanks to those at the bar table. Court will adjourn.
In a letter to her family, Jessica wrote, "It didn't hit me at first, but then it hit me like a ton of bricks, like a mountain. I know it's my fault that my mother isn't here." In September 2022, it was reported that Jessica was appealing her sentence, and her lawyer argued a lesser sentence should have been given because she had been willing to plead guilty to manslaughter before the trial. She had done everything she could to bring about the outcome that was achieved as early as she could, he said. He also said that her behaviour had improved considerably since moving to a different prison. The Crown was fighting back against the appeal, saying the gravity of what Jessica had done deserved a heavy sentence. Her appeal was successful. Her sentence was reduced to 16 years and 6 months in custody, with a non-parole period of 12 years. 2 of the 3 judges had granted the appeal. The judge said objectively the facts were gruesome and brutal and involved a frenzied attack on an innocent victim in her own home. On the other hand, the offence was spontaneous and the result of Camilleri losing control of herself because of her complex psychiatric illness. Her behaviour of walking into the street with her mother's head and dropping it, as well as asking emergency services personnel whether they could reattach it, demonstrated the extent to which the applicant's conduct was divorced from the real world. Since beginning her sentence, she has been charged with multiple violent attacks against fellow inmates and officers. In 2021, she was charged with attacking 2 female corrective services officers. One of them told the court, "My hair was ripped from my scalp. I felt lost and isolated for weeks after the assault. While I continue to physically endure pain and discomfort, the psychological toll is what weighs heaviest on me. The assault shattered my sense of security." One of the officers attacked would also be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Then again, in August 2023, she was charged with 2 counts of common assault after allegedly attacking 2 female guards. An additional 22 months were added to her sentence with a non-parole period of 15 months. She told the court, "I don't understand this as a waste of time. They don't like me and people outside want me to face more time. I'm looking at a long time in jail. I've been targeted because of what the other girls have made me out to be. They single me out in prison because of the nature of my crime. Corrections moved me from that wing where that fight occurred. I don't know what they're doing, but now there's some behavioural wing. They want to keep me there for a month before moving me to the women's prison. No matter what I do, no matter where I go, other prisoners will make my life a living hell. It's not like the outside world. It's hard in here." Despite the horrific nature of the crime that happened in that house, the property would later be put back on the market to be rented out. With a case like this, it's genuinely hard to find the words to end it properly. The challenges of caring for someone with such complex needs can be both extremely difficult and exhausting, but Rita refused to give up on Jessica, showing a deep and unconditional love. The depths of trauma that those left behind will have to live with are impossible to truly comprehend. One can only hope that with the passage of time, there is a chance for some much-needed healing.